All right, you legends, I want to show you, I'm about to do the handlebar installation on this Colnago. But I want to show you what your options are that comes with the bike. Get a good shot of the workbench here. So Colnago sends this with these tubes already inserted, which will facilitate your ability to feed. I'm going to feed the line that you saw me use through the headset, what I call the lifeline. It's a routing tool. I'm going to feed that through there and pull. And as I pull, what you can also do, which I may end up doing, is attaching the hose to this one and just pull it through. I'll see which is more efficient. But that's why they put that in there. Even if this weren't there, I would still use my line. But this makes it a lot easier because I don't have to fish for it through the handlebar here. That's the only thing with these routing things, and that's why the shops charge a little more, because it takes more time to get this stuff in there. The other thing they do is, since the bike is literally without a steerer tube, they give you, let me open this. Make sure this is on the workbench. I'm standing to the side so you can see it. You have about 1 inch of spacers. 2.5 centimeters exactly equals 1 inch. That's the amount of spacers they send. I'm gonna put it down here so you can see it better. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Basically, they're 5 millimeter spacers each. And so it's 2.5 centimeters. Now, depending on what you choose to do, you have to use different length bolts. They're in this bag. I left them in there just to open them when I did this video. So you have these bolts in here. There are different lengths. As you can see, depending on the amount of spacers you choose, you have to use the appropriate length bolts. And so the rest of the bolts I will put in a bag for the customer when I'm done, because he has requested that I set it up with 2.5. So I'm putting all the spacers there. So if you want to slam everything, you would not use spacers at all. You have to use the shortest bolt that they have here for that. The bolt lengths for front and back on the bars differ. We'll deal with that later, but I wanted to share this with you. Also, these are called the handlebar rear cap. That's the space between the fork and the top tube of the bike. So these will take up that little recess between when you saw me do the other video where I was installing the fixing bolt. That's where these sit. And depending on what you choose, once again, you get to pick different lengths of these. I'm gonna lay them out here like this so you can see them. They're not in any particular order. I just want you to see that they're all different. So of course, I'm going to be using the longest one, which is this one, for 2.5. So basically it is going to go behind these guys like that. So I've decided to use these pre-inserted tubes to pull my cable through. I'm using an adapter from my kit. And I'm not sure if it came with a part tool kit or was from another kit, but I've had a bunch of kits over the years, and I keep the most functional connectors. This is a connector that I've screwed in here, similar to what I had before. The reason I removed that original line is the end of that line had a magnet on it that would not fit through these blue tubes. And I don't want to take these tubes out and have to go through from scratch to get everything through here. So I'm going to try, first of all, see if it works. I'm going to screw this into this blue tube. I think I can probably just insert it. Yeah, you can't really screw it because it's hollow. But I'm going to just push this because the junction point is thick enough. This is the rear brake. So I'm going to push this in here, insert it in there, and hopefully it will be strong enough to get through. So now it's in there. I may have to zoom in post-production, but it's in there now. It's like one piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push, because I don't want to pull, because this is not attached to anything in that blue tube. So I'm going to push through the cavity. While I'm pushing, I'm going to pull on this side and continue, push, pull. And it looks like it's working. I'm pushing the cable, I hold it and I pull a little bit. I push more, and you can see the blue one coming out. I'm gonna pull that. I'm gonna continue to push, 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 like that. And my goal is to get this to come, there's the junction where I insert it. I believe that, yeah, that looks like the junction. I'm gonna push some more. There we go. There we go. That was the easiest routing. So kudos to Colnago for leaving these blue inserts in there. That's just genius. I know they can't do something like that for this new design non-steerer fork, but this piece of cake. So yeah, big improvements. I'm gonna pull. So now my cable is through the bars. And what you wanna do is pull, get all of it out. Let's do the same thing here. Okay, like that. I've got a table there for this to hang on, but I'm just gonna let it hang here for now. That's another reason I love to wrap the bar. You can see where I'm gonna turn the frame a little bit. Let's see here. Let's loosen the whole stand. I want to show you something. This is another reason I wrap the frame. When I was trained as a mechanic, by wrapping here, look at where the bar is. Right on that area that's wrapped, okay? It's just hanging there for now. I've got the cable through. What I want to show you, maybe I should go down or move back a little bit. Let's move this camera back just a tad. About there. So what made this work was not just the blue thing, was having the ability, let me pull this out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this connector that I used to show you. This connector made it happen right there. It's got threads on this side, threads on that side. The threads really work for screwing into this guy. I could not screw into this tube because it's hollow. So, but this junction part of it, this junction part slipped in enough to where I was able to do this. Like that. That junction is thick enough to where it just fits with a little resistance. And then I pushed this through as opposed to pulling this too much. I pushed it. Once I felt it kind of had excess inside, then I will pull this a little bit, but then continue to push. If you don't have a junction to make these two, then it's pretty much impossible to do, because all you have to route your cable through this, because the little cables will go through, but you need a routing kit. So instead of me using cables, I just used this junction. It just made sense. And I'm going to do the same thing for the other side, because that one is already closed off on the side. I never cut that end. So what I may do is see if it'll go inside the blue one and then pull it through. This is for the front that's sticking up under there. Let's see if this will just go inside that. But these are so close that it's basically I'm having to use force to spread the blue, which is a good thing because it needs to be tight to go through. And I've got enough in there to where I think I can push it through. So let's go. I'm just going to do mostly pushing. That's the plan. Come on. Come on. Yes, it worked. All right. All right. I mean, I'm excited because it's like, if it didn't work, it would just be more time involved. So now, so those of you with these fancy bikes, you can see what mechanics have to go through. And the blue stuff just fell off. But this is the reason I was able to push it through and basically spread that blue cable, because the circumference of this blue cable is pretty much exactly like this, but this is a softer material. So that metal tip allowed me to spread this a little bit more, push it in there. It was tight enough. That's why you saw me push. I never pulled because it would have come out. The junction would have come out. So the inserting that blue stuff ahead of time definitely worked. So I'm pushing this all the way through. And this is what it looks like underneath here. These holes are for the bolts that's going to attach this to this frame. So there is nothing, once you attach this to this frame, it's there. It's literally kind of, I guess it's slammed in a way, but there is no, there's nothing between the two. It just goes that all your adjustments now are going to be done with the spacers. And this is the reason the spacers are like that. And since this customer, you can see here, they've got, the spacer is basically cut out to fit in there. So each one, you have to spread it, put it around the cable like that. The customer wants all 5 on there, and then he will play around in the future. But it's actually probably better if you decide to do something like this, to give your measurements to the shop so they can just set it up for you, so you don't have to hassle with it, because it's a bit of a hassle in a way. I mean, it's not as bad, but you still have to deal with the cables every time you change the height. So what I'm going to do is make decisions based on how much extra cable do I leave inside the bars? Because I want to leave a little bit inside the bar. You don't want it super, super tight. But it's not going to be something that anybody would see or the customer would notice. So what I'm doing here is feeding this around the cable, these spacers here. And then I want to bring this down like that. I'm going to put this here. Okay. And then come down. All right. So, and this is a challenge, because if you decide to go lower, you're going to have extra cable in here. What do you do with that? You got 2 options. You can push the excess back into the frame, because think about it, you're only playing with 1 inch. Okay, that 2.5 is 1 inch. So you got an inch of cable. If you decide, hey, I want to move a spacer, or I want to do this, and this is how it sits. Should he decide to go all the way to where you're slamming, meaning you don't have any spacers, that's this much extra cable they'll have. And then it's easier to just, and I will explain to the customer, it's easier at that time, the cable that you saw hanging when they're removing these spacers, just push that 1 inch either towards inside the frame or inside the bars, and you will have extra cable inside the bars. So the 1 inch is not that big a deal, but you just got to deal with that. So look at that bad boy. Okay, this was so much easier than anything down here. This was a bear. Why was it that difficult? Because the hole in that preload bolt that it had to go through was about the size of the brake cable. So the cable didn't have much room to move around. So it kept getting pinched in there. That's what made it hard. Just, completely different setup. So now, since this is at the highest level, of course, I will be using the longest bolts. And basically you bolt them to just stay there. And then I'm going to put the handlebars on there and bleed everything and get this set up based on where the handlebars will be placed. So once you've made the decision on how many spacers to use, you have to choose the appropriate end cap. I showed you the caps earlier. They have different lengths. I'm picking the longest one, of course. It's 2.5. This goes right behind the handlebar here. It's going to fill this little space between there and the frame. You need to install this with this hex screw, because you need to do it first before you install the handlebars. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to do it. It goes under the cap. And so what I'm going to do, there's a hole behind here on the bar, on the handlebar itself. I'm going to use this hex screwdriver to kind of make it easy. Come on this side. And I'm going to just line it up. There's a little, they have a slit on the back of this. There's a slit on there, goes all the way up to allow this. If you don't do this before you install the handlebar, you're going to be giving yourself a hard time. So you can see I have the cap high up right now because that's the only way I can access that screw in there. Once I'm done, then I will slide it down. I showed you that long slit that would allow it to slide down over the spacers. And that is the reason they designed it like that. Makes perfect sense. Because if you don't do it before you install the handlebar, you will have no access to the back of it. So now it's snug. I'm going to loosen a little bit and go down. That allows you to do this. You can see now, I just slid it down using the slot that I showed you. It's in there. And once you've got it in position, let's do that. So this is primarily to install it first because you're going to come back and tighten it. It's kind of out of the way, it's way up here. So once you install the handlebar, it's hard to really access, but it's a 7mm hex. So I use this tool to get it in there. But once it's fully installed and I've installed it, I will turn it and use an open end 7mm hex to finally tighten it. Because you can't tighten it completely while it's up here because you need to slide it down. And you don't want to put it all the way in flush before you get these guys in because then there's a hassle to line it up. You can see how they line up now. That's how it is. That's how it's supposed to be. So the process matters when you're dealing with something like this that has a lot of constraints in spacing. And this is how it would look. So each time you want to take out one of these spacers, you would do the reverse. You move that, use a 7mm. This is what we use for, I have one here that we use when we bleed in the shop. This is what I'm going to use once everything is assembled when I turn it to get it nice and tight, just snug. It doesn't need to be super tight just to make sure it's in there. But I had it snug so I could slide that down like that. This is nice. It looks really, really clean. So every time you change a spacer, it's not the end of the world. It's a little bit of a hassle, but really not too bad. And the bolts, I want to talk about the bolts. The bolts, the longest ones are going to go in front, and then the two shorter ones will go in the back. And as you go down, every time you remove a spacer, they got two other sets of bolts until you get to where you're dealing with the last one. But the front bolts are always 5mm longer than the rear, regardless of what setting you use. Colnago sends 4 washers for you to use for the handlebar bolts. You need to make sure when you put these in that you're pushing the bolt all the way down while making sure that the spacers are level so that the bolt can go and catch the treads. Remember, the treads are all the way at the top of the fork because these are just spacers you're going through. If you don't line them up correctly and push them down, you won't be able to tread them. And you need to start treading them by hand and make sure they're treading before you use anything else because you don't want to mess up the treads in the top of the fork. I can literally feel it grabbing right now. That's the way you do it. You do it for all 4 bolts, and then we're going to torque. So now we're going to set the torque to 6 Newton meters. I'm using a Park Tool torque wrench here. TW5 is called. You can use any brand you have. This is a 5mm socket. I'm going to go crisscross. They were already snug before I got the torque wrench in there, but I'm crisscrossing to make sure the pressure is being applied straight down. You always want to do that. so that when they finally get tight, it will be tight uniformly. Whenever you're working with these tools, if you don't do this all the time, you want to make sure that the socket gets in there and basically seats. You don't want to just leave it at the top. So when it gets in, you got to kind of push down to make sure you got a good connection in there so you don't strip the bolt. You could hear it when it got seated, because initially when you get in, it doesn't always. There we go. That's 6 Newton meters. Come over here. 6 Newton meters over here. I'm gonna go back over here. 6 Newton meters. I'm gonna come back over here. 6 Newton meters, and just verify. So they're evenly torqued. And Colnago sent these covers. This one has their Colnago logo on it. It's just to hide the bolt. The feet clip into the bolt. And you just kind of pop them in. And I could feel just a nice tight compression there. Flush. There's a little slit there. You would use a screwdriver to lift that off if you were making any changes. The one for the rear does not have their logo on it. And it's supposed to sit into these bolts as well. Right there, I can feel it going in. There. Perfect. Okay. Now I'm going to turn this and use my 7mm open end to finally tighten the bolt that holds that, because I had it snug. You have to do it snug to get it in there. Now I can reach up here. I may need to put some light on the subject. I always have flashlights all over the shop. Everything's black and black nowadays, you can't see. So basically using this angle to get this in there, just kind of snug the bolt. You don't need to get all crazy. There's a plastic sleeve. So this is what you would have to go through if you were continually messing with your spacers. Now that's snug. This cover is snug behind there. So if you don't know how to remove the cover and all of that, it can be a hassle because that bolt is under here. And that's done. All right, these are the levers. Shimano Dura-Ace 9270. The 9270. And it's really nice. They have these little plugs on it. Those white plugs you see, they're there for a reason. There's fluid in the master cylinder. If you take those out before you're ready, fluid will leak out. It has to be bled anyway. What I usually do with these is I lube the little ring back here. I'm gonna make sure it's loose enough to get on the bars without me working to it. I'm just gonna use my finger and run just a little bit of grease inside the ring so it can slide on the bar without marring the bar. All right. Get some loose. There we go. Nice and loose. It just kind of gets on there. So with the grease I put on there, I don't want it to scrape these nice carbon bars. So I'm loosening it as I slide, just enough. There. It's thicker right here on the end. So once it gets past the end, you're pretty much done. And then you bring it up. And I'm going to line it up here. For now, just kind of snug it. Line it like this. There we go. Just all the way up. We'll stop it in the same spot as the other side. It's marked. I'm giving it right to the top. He wanted it as high as possible. And basically, this is like the standard setting. And then the riders can tweak within a centimeter or so. It's not much. Okay. And I'll straighten it and so forth later. But right now, this is just to get the cable length cut and all of that. And you can see the bike is taking shape. Here we go. Okay. So once I do, at this point, I'm going to start taking all the stuff off the frame because most of the stuff is done. I did find out something about the saddle that we'll talk about later.